Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today evening for the discussion on, the recent agri reforms, its impact, and the various opportunities that these reforms bring to us. We have two very esteemed panelists alongside, today evening discussing this with us, Mr. Balram Singh Yadav and Mr. G. Chandrasekhar. Both of them individually don't really need an introduction, but I'll try my best to give you all a very quick background about the two of them. Mr. Balram Singh Yadav is currently the managing director at Godrej Agrovet. He has been with the company since early 1900. So 1990, since 1990, he's been with them. And over the years, he's handled multiple roles where he's had increasing responsibility across businesses in the company. He established the brands Real Good Chicken and Yummies as the leading process and poultry brands in the country. In 2007, he took over the reins of Godrej Agrovet as the managing director. As his first challenge, he had successfully, turned around Godrej Agrovet, which was then a loss-making entity, and put it on the path towards rapid growth. In 2017, he was also instrumental in taking them public. He's also an active angel investor, mentoring the next generation entrepreneurs. So that's a little something about Mr. Balram Singh Yadav. Mr. G. Chandrasekhar is a global agribusiness and commodity market specialist. He passionately analyzes and comments on agriculture, agribusinesses, and commodity markets. He's been, he has been writing for India's, most credible business daily, the Hindu Business Line, for over 25 years now, and also has been providing policy inputs to the government. He's been speaking regularly at national and international forums on a range of topics, which include the Indian macroeconomy, food and nutrition security, the role of technology in agriculture, trade and investment opportunities, etc. He has held and continues to hold several public positions. Currently, he is, an economic advisor to the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's an international consultant to the UN International Trade Center, and is also an independent member with SEBI on the Commodity Derivative and Advisory Committee. So I will now hand it over to Mr. Balram Singh Yadav. He has a 10-minute presentation that he would like to take us through. And post that, we'll open it up, with the panelists for question and answers. So over to you.
So good evening, friends. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must say that I'm honored to be a co-panelist with Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Oh my God!
We have all, I would say, impinged on his wisdom all along whenever we are faced with some issue, because he is the encyclopedia of Indian agriculture and he has studied every topic. So what I will do is that I will share a presentation quickly. So. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can see, yeah.
Yeah, so we can see it.
So I'll just go through the charts quickly because unfortunately without data I cannot talk much. It is just a very brief note about Indian agriculture and where we have reached and what are the challenges. So I think we have to ensure food security for a sixth of humanity. That is a very big task. And Mr. Chandrasekhar will agree that we are obsessed with this.
Absolutely.
So from a food deficit to a food surplus nation, population has grown 3x and food grain production 6x. Junior people don't know that at one time we were importing almost everything in the 50s and 60s from other countries, including milk. Now, at least except for edible oil, we don't import any food. And last year, food grain production was 297 million tons. In 1960s, it used to be about 50 million tons. And this year we are threatening to cross 300 million tons because of good monsoon. So I think we will have a problem of plenty, which is the next thing country has to solve for. A few years ago, pulses was also a problem. Then came this high inflation and a pulse plan from the government. They incentivized growing pulses. But the big job was done by huge inflation. A few years ago, we all complained of pulses touching 200 rupees. And that's what helped the farmers to grow more pulses. More area came and a little bit of technology came and productivity has improved. Today, we have excess of pulses and there is a 30% import duty on pulses. last 20 years have seen disproportionate growth. You can see for last two decades, 29% increase in population, food grain 51%. But look at animal protein, fish doubled, milk 1.32 times, eggs tripled, and poultry is 6 times of what it was in year 2000. Animal agriculture is now the key growth driver. Pure agriculture has grown about 0.3% in last 6-7 years, whereas animal agriculture is about 11%, and this rate will continue. Today we are at about 34-35% of agri GDP. We will be about, animal agriculture will be 50% of GDP in another 7-8 years. Numbers, we are top in milk production, number one in sugar, number one in cotton, second in fruits and vegetables. This is revolutionary. Second in wheat, second in paddy. I've compared with comparative industries also, and I'll share this presentation so you all can get access to it. So look at paddy, which is size of the agri is very big in size. So if you take the milk industry, 7 lakh crores. So fruits and vegetables, 4.5 lakhs, wheat, 2 lakh crores, paddy, more than 2 lakh crores. Egg is about 60,000 crores. Shrimp exports is about 28,000 crores. So I'm saying that except for edible oil, we are self-sufficient. And despite surplus production, our share in global exports is very poor, and we are losing that edge. And one of the reasons is our internal policies of MSP, etc., which keeps our prices high, and we are not globally competitive. At one time, we were exporting about 2-3 million tons of corn and about 1 million tons of soya meal extraction to Bangladesh. We have been edged out of that market totally because they find it cheaper to import from Latin America than from India. But for this year slightly we are competitive. Agri exports are declining. You've seen that 13-14 we were $43 billion, now $29 billion. So is our export surplus from 27 billion to 14 billion. Let me also tell you that this year there has been some improvement, but that is not because of any structural improvement. 15% of GDP, 50% of the population, biggest structural flaw. And I think this summarizes the problem we have in agriculture. And ratio of population engaged versus GDP contribution is much higher than any other country. If you see Argentina, 0.54% population contribute 5.61% of GDP. And even Vietnam also 40% population is 15% of GDP. We are about 50% population, 15% of GDP. And China 17% for about 8%. Everybody says farmer income has to double, but if you see real income growth has been 3.6%, FY94 to FY14, almost 20 years. It took for the income to double, and GDP growth was 6.5%. In last 4 years, growth has been 3%. To get to double the income, we need 15% growth in real income in next 3 years to get to that number. So, which is impossible. Land holding is very small. That is what is holding lot of investment in mechanization, poor economies of scale, technology transfer is not easy, adoption of technology not easy, access to credit becomes difficult. But this is a problem for India. Now, our average holding is about 1.2 hectares. China is at about 0.6, 0.7, but they have solved this problem. And in case anybody is interested, I can talk a lot about that. Disparity in irrigation infrastructure, I think this remains the biggest problem. Our soils are very good. Unfortunately, 50% of India is still rain-fed. And you can see Punjab, Haryana, almost 90+% irrigated. And look at their yield, around 4 tons per hectare. Haryana is about 3.7 tons per hectare. Look at Karnataka and Maharashtra. These two states boast of their agriculture so much. About 22%, 23% area in agriculture, and grain production is 1.7, 1.4 tons respectively. R&D spends have been very, very poor in this country as a percentage of agri GDP. It is negligible. And let me also tell you, out of this 0.3% of agri GDP, 90% money is taken by wheat, paddy, and sugar, and milk. So research in oil seed, pulses, fruits and vegetables, poultry, and aqua, shrimp, etc., negligible. We keep on pouring money in the rural sector, all for P&L, not for the balance sheet. Very little of this money gets into capital formation or build assets, but we keep on pouring money. We spend close to 25,000 rupees per farmer, and this does not include the food subsidy bill of 2 lakh crores. And apart from that, the states also keep on pouring. That comes to about 10,000 rupees per farmer household. So almost 35 to 40,000 rupees exchequer spends on each farmer to deliver this kind of a performance which we have. We just keep on procuring, and this MSP is a forced buying by the farmers on the government, whether the government needs it or not. We have a problem of plenty. We have surpluses, but we still keep on buying. You can see that actual stock at different times is more than double and sometimes close to triple of whatever we need. And we carry this at the cost of huge working capital, storage cost, spoilages, etc. Now, whatever is the food subsidy bill, etc., is there, that is fine. But FCI has to procure, keep, and they keep on losing money. And you can see how FCI debt is rising rapidly, and it will be close to 3 lakh crores this year. And everybody feels that farmers are only dependent on agriculture, but only 43% of their total income comes from agri, about 35% from cultivation, and about 8% from livestock. Now the problem is, for last 70 years, we have been solving for shortages. So we do not know how to solve for surpluses, because surpluses requires market access, surpluses requires selling, surpluses requires cost management, surpluses require branding, surpluses require going and selling to the rest of the world. And I don't think our policy makers are anywhere near that skill. So new farm bills, we will talk in detail. These 3 farm bills are great reforms. As Mr. Ashok Gulati, the great agri-economist, said that this is a 1991 moment for Indian agriculture, and I fully believe that. They have really not only done this, but they have done several things together, because it had to be a package. All along last 10 years, Mr. Chandrasekhar would know that only one bill wouldn't have solved the problem. So this had to come together. And this has come together, so that is the great thing government has done. And they have also brought great other changes also through the bill and outside it to support the whole thing. One is price discovery mechanism is more transparent. Farmer producer organization focus is very important to consolidate farmers, because land holding is small and they need to be funded. They need to organize themselves so that they build scale, not only to negotiate with the buyers, but also to roll out technology, etc. So this is a very important initiative. 1 lakh crores of infrastructure fund is very important. The reason is that near farm infrastructure is lacking. In case they want people not to go to APMC, they need an alternative infrastructure. Contract farming, I think the best part has been the dispute resolution has come to bureaucracy. It is a welcome step. How it happens, we will see. But at least farmers don't have to go to the court initially, because the cases will keep on languishing for ages. Onboarding state government is something which is very important now. Almost 14-15 states have also signed up. The state which we are in which we live had signed up at one time, but they have withdrawn that right now. The other thing was Kisan Credit Card, because once you pull out people from the APMC, you have to also pull out people from the clutches of the Adathiyas. For that, Kisan Credit Card is very important. What a great initiative. The farmers can get 1.6 lakh rupees loan without any collateral. They can go up to 3 lakhs with collateral. 7% interest. If they pay on time, the interest rate comes down to 4%. The problem with Indian credit system is that whatever the banks and the government gives, farmer has no obligation to return, even if it is at a low credit. Whatever the Adathiyas or the money lender gives at 18 to 24% interest, he has to return. So their credit worthiness with the government is very poor. So unfortunately, that is one of the reasons why Adathiyas will always remain in the game. But I'm sure that with these initiatives, because of competitive intensity, they will also change their old ways. One FPO which I give example of is Sayadri Farms, the largest exporter of grapes from the country. The second, third, fourth position is with the private sector, and the second position is with Mahindra. So you can imagine how much better they would be as compared to us to hold that first position. So this is very well done. I think it's a role model for everybody to follow. Two more charts. I said that capital formation is not happening in our sector. You can see that gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sector is almost at the same percentage of gross value added. Whereas China in early 2000, just to counter the small land holding, disproportionate investment was made by their public sectors. And second thing is that gap between falling incomes and rising expenses is increasing rapidly for the farmer. That is why they are becoming poorer, and we have to shell more and more from the exchequer to keep on supporting them. So I think we are in a difficult situation as far as Indian agriculture is concerned. 1.4 billion people have to be fed. Almost 70 crore people have to be taken care of because they produce the food for 1.4 billion people. And it is a suboptimal system, both in terms of participation of population, in terms of productivity and competitiveness in, globally. But this is where we are. So that's all.
Thank you. That was very, very informative, Balram. If I may open up for a few questions as well. So you spoke about we spoke about the Indian agriculture economy, some of the problems, and also the recently enacted laws. If I may just move over to Chandrasekhar sir. So, agriculture has primarily been a state subject, and the key question is, how has the government found a way to kind of implement these laws, which are centered around these three key bills which have just been passed, which is around farm trade and APMC, contract farming, and essential commodities. So, some thoughts from you on that will be great.
Right. Before I go into that, I want to compliment Balram for a fantastic presentation, which gives a snapshot of Indian agriculture, the challenges that that agriculture is facing. Very, very interesting, informative presentation, loaded with a lot of facts. Thank you, Balram, for sharing this.
My pleasure, sir.
Number two, yes, Mudit, you said this is a state subject. Agriculture is a state subject. Agri-marketing is a state subject. Water is a state subject. Markets are state subject. And therefore, how could the central government have done this? That is one of the reasons why there is a lot of protest in some parts of the country. And a part of the protesters is because the entrenched interests of certain sections of the value chain participants is under challenge, and therefore they are protesting. But otherwise, I will not be surprised if going forward, state governments take this matter to the Supreme Court and mount a legal challenge. And there are reasons why they should be doing. The central government has done a commendable job of passing these laws. There is absolutely no doubt at all. These are very much required for this country. I only wish the central government had done prior stakeholder consultation, but they have not done the stakeholder consultation. They have just gone ahead and enacted the law. I wrote, in fact, about 15 days ago, an opinion piece in the Hindu Business Line that it's now become law, but yet I don't want the central government to stay smug, feeling that, okay, law pass ho gaya, abhi now it will be implemented. No, there will be legal challenges because the central government has willy-nilly stepped on the toes of the state government in some way. Had they taken the state governments and farmers' organizations into confidence, we would not have seen the kind of protest that we are seeing. So this is number one. For even now, it is not late. The central government, I would think the Prime Minister should take the initiative in calling a meeting of all the states and explaining to them, number one. Number two, this had to be done at some stage. For at least 10 or 12 years, people like me have been talking about the need to take agriculture out of the state list and take it to the concurrent list. Not the central list, but the concurrent list, where both the states and the center can legislate. Because we need for agriculture uniform policies across the country and uniform implementation. If because it is in the state list, different states attach different levels of importance for agriculture, and different states are able to invest different amount, varying amounts, but very small amounts in agriculture. And therefore, we need actually a national policy, a national scheme, or a national strategy for agriculture. And these reforms are in that direction of having a national policy. But I want to just add, for sake of clarity, these reforms are not agricultural reforms. These reforms are agri-market reforms. Agriculture reforms are very different. These are agri-market reforms. This is trying to reform the market in terms of one nation, one agri-market, in terms of creating a competition for the state regulated APMC market. The government wants to create competition in terms of private markets. It wants to build a legal framework for contract farming, etc. Therefore, these are agri-market reforms which are extremely important. But for a real, genuine agricultural reforms, we need the government or the policy needs to address a number of structural issues. In fact, Balram pointed out some of those structural issues. For example, the input delivery system, water or irrigation, infusion of technology in agriculture, capacity building amongst farmers, risk management. I mean, there are a whole lot of things that there will be a very different dialogue. Maybe we can do it at some stage. But these reforms had to be done. The central government took the plunge without consulting the states. They went ahead and they have done this. But these are going to have profound impact on agri markets and agri marketing. I would think that 1991 moment that everybody is talking about would arrive when and if in one stroke we address all the structural problems. That would be the 1991 moment. But for me, these reforms are post-production reforms. These reforms are market reforms, which are very important, very, very necessary. And therefore, I think we must compliment the center for coming up this. And my only hope and prayer is that they are able to withstand pressure from various state governments, because these are very positive, good for the farmers. Yeah.
Sure, very interesting, sir. Just to take it forward slightly, and specifically talking about the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Act, which basically is centered around the APMC and the freedom for the farmers to sell the produce wherever they want.
Yeah.
So how will this bill, how will this law end the so-called monopoly of the APMCs and thereby benefiting the farmers? And just to add on, would you also be able to throw some light on how has the experience of, a few states like Bihar and Kerala been, which have not chosen to, use the APMC route for farmers to sell the produce?
Right. A lot of people are now writing the obituary of APMC markets. I don't believe so. Number one, I would like actually APMC markets to reinvent themselves. I wrote about it again, maybe a month or a couple of months ago. There is a great opportunity for the APMC markets to reinvent themselves. It devolves on the state government. Every state government must now depoliticize the agri-produce market committees. They're highly politicized. They need to depoliticize. That needs huge amount of will, political will to depoliticize. But the state governments, I hope, wish and pray that they demonstrate that political will and depoliticize. The APMC markets have a lot of infrastructure. They have a track record. And therefore, they must now infuse technology in all the transactions. They must become more transparent in price discovery. And the system of enlisted commission agents who are licensed commission agents alone will deal with the farmers and often shortchange the farmers. This has been a great weakness or shortcoming of the APMC system that must change. And therefore, the state governments have to take a very active role in reforming the APMC markets so that the farmers continue to come back to these markets with confidence. But with the government, with this law allowing private markets, the degrees of marketing freedom for the farmers have actually expanded. Farmers now need not go to the APMC markets. Farmers are free to go to the private markets. And therefore, which again, this is very good. But remember, private markets are not going to mushroom overnight. I sense that it'll take at least 1 year for private investors and entrepreneurs to crystallize a business model that will work for them, because there will be no fee, there will be no cess, there will be no charges. At the same time, the private market, whoever buys in the private market, the farmers will have to be paid almost immediately or the next day, maybe T+1, transaction +1. Therefore, it'll need huge liquidity. And therefore, it will evolve. The private markets will evolve over the next 1 year is my very, very strong view. And that is that 1 year time available to all the state governments and to all the APMC markets to revamp themselves and reinvent themselves, make them more credible, make them more relevant to the new situation. So this is the one point. The second point is one nation, one market. That is, interstate and intrastate movement restrictions have been removed under this law, which is very important. Now, farmers are free to sell to anybody. Farmers are free to move the goods to any place in India and sell there. This again is a very positive step. But the legal question is, how can the central government say that that in intrastate movement restrictions are removed? It is within the purview of the state government. For state governments have to take on board the benefits of removing intrastate restrictions, but this has the risk of becoming a legal matter. But let's see, let's wait and see. But again, this one nation, one market is again a great positive move forward, both for the farmers and for the processing houses who are buyers of these agriculture commodities. And therefore, I think we need to welcome this law. But please do not write off APMC markets. I have in fact even mentioned in one of my pieces that unviable APMC markets should be privatized. Why not? There are 7,500 mandis across the country. And I'm sure there'll be investors who would be keen to buy APMC markets because they have infrastructure. And therefore, the states will have to now start examining all the possibilities. Yeah. So I think it's a very positive.
Very interesting, sir. Thank you. Balram, your views on the same topic, and, would also like to understand, in case the APMC markets evolve, and you might see a lot of private market participation. What is the real challenge that you foresee, firstly, for private markets to develop, which is a parallel ecosystem like the APMCs? And how much private participation do you really see on this?
So, 2-3 things I would like to probably comment on. I think on the legal aspects of this law. So one thing which I am very sure is that if the state governments could challenge the law in Supreme Court, they could have challenged. The reason is because Punjab evaluated it very, very carefully, and they have used that section 33 of the concurrent list. And the law clearly says that in case of dispute, the central law prevails in almost 95% of the circumstances. There have been circumstances where the state law can prevail, but I think that one thing you must grant it to them is that whether they pass laws overnight or whether they pass laws in one day, I think on the legal side, they work for months together. So that I think is something which I am very sure of. And Mr. Chandrasekhar, very sorry to say that I love the concept of this competitive federalism, but I think whichever sector is with the state is languishing. And unfortunately, today we have come to a polity where we oppose for the sake of opposing.
That's right, absolutely.
So that is the second point. Third point, I fully agree with Mr. Chandrasekhar. APMCs, because of competition, will become more efficient. Just look at the fact they have the infrastructure. 7,000 plus APMCs are there, 2,500 large and about 5,000 small. They have the traders, they have the weighing scales, they have the shops, they have the platforms, they have the roads. I think to create that infrastructure will require lakhs of crores in time to come. So, but they will become more competitive, and the signs of that are seen. Karnataka has already dropped APMC fee from 1.5% to 0.35%. And Maharashtra and Haryana and Punjab are making so much of noise. They have dropped the APMC for the exportable rice from 2% to 0.5%. So this competitiveness will increase. Now, how will the private mandis come? I must tell you that private mandis will be mostly driven by your startups. The way so much of consolidation in fruits and vegetables is happening, according to me, next 18 to 24 months, 80 to 90% of Indian fruits and vegetable will consolidate because of technology. All these startups, you may not need physical infrastructure. And we have seen that wherever this procurement starts, particularly I had visited one place about a year ago near Delhi, where the FPO movement was driven by buyer. And whenever I want to tell you with my 31 years experience in agri, that if you have a confirmed buyer, the farmers organize in no time. They produce the quality, they produce the quantity you want, they will specialize in a particular product. The whole village can produce that product for you. But the offtake should be guaranteed. So if that happens with modern retail growing, I think this will happen. You had asked a very important question on Punjab, Haryana and Kerala. I want to answer that with data, and I want to drill holes in the logic which people give.
Let me compare
Bihar with Maharashtra. There is only one state I can compare with because of population. 12 crore here, 12 crore there. ठीक है? उसके बाद arable land is 11.5 million hectares in Maharashtra, 5.5 million hectares in Bihar. Industrialization, Bhagwan Malik. Bihar, if Maharashtra is 7 upon 10, Bihar is not even 1 upon 10. So there are no jobs. And let me throw some more data on you. That point is that then I'll tell you how Bihar is performing. Punjab, the holding is 3.62 hectares. Bihar is 0.39. Kerala is 0.18. Income from cultivation monthly. Punjab 12,481. This is from Rural Financial Inclusion Survey of NABARD. Income from cultivation monthly 12,481 in Punjab. Bihar 1,652. Kerala 6,284. Per hectare income per month. Punjab 3,448. Bihar higher than Punjab 4,236. Kerala 34,910. Because government procurement was not there, no government was supporting, so they moved towards cash crops. Cereals 68.9% in Punjab. In Bihar 38.9%. You know, coconut farms, Mr. Chandrasekhar will tell you how profitable they are. Fruits and vegetables 10% in Punjab. 34.5% in Bihar. And you know, 88% of rice and 71% of wheat of Punjab is procured by FCI. And I'll tell you that scandal also. That racket also, I'll tell you why these people are. And only 1 million metric ton of rice is procured from Bihar, which is 15% of their production. How much wheat was procured last year from Bihar? 3,000 tons. How much wheat was procured from Punjab? 13 million tons. So the issue is that look at what Bihar has done in spite of no support and bad governance. Bihar has become the leading state in corn. all the big guys go and procure in corn. If India becomes a big exporter of corn, has become a big exporter of corn whenever it is competitive, it is because of Bihar.
Yeah.
It is because of all the companies and all the feed millers have gone there. And what is growing rapidly? Cereals are not growing. There is a negative growth rate of cereals in Bihar. Banana, 20% CAGR. Tobacco, 11% CAGR. You know, Bihar is blessed with the best soil because of poor infrastructure, and there is flood. Flood deposits water and silt. You don't need irrigation in that state. For everybody, for all feed milling companies, Bihar is the source of all the raw materials for Eastern India and the produced product for Northeast. If only it had good governance, it could have really exploded actually. So the issue is that don't blame APMC or don't credit APMC for Bihar. Bihar's problem are totally different. Now you had APMC, you have such a big industrialization in these states. What have you done? So I'm saying that this is a wrong logic.
Very interesting, sir. Actually, that's a very, very good and very, very interesting perspective. So moving on from there, just to spend some time on the entire contract farming side of things, which is the second large bill which has been implemented. So contract farming in some ways is not really new to India. You know, there have been farmers who've been doing it in their own ways with corporates, with whoever. How will this new law on contract farming really help the farmers? What is your perspective and take on this?
Who are you asking this question?
So both of you all, actually, you can start, Chandrasekhar sir, and then we will move on to Balram.
All right. Okay. You may be surprised. India's first contract farming project in cotton through the private sector. I was involved. I was a part of the brains trust of a friend's family back in Tamil Nadu, near Coimbatore. As a third generation ginning pressing factory owner, etc. And therefore, I talked about a possibility of contract farming. In 2002, we started contract farming. 800 farmers, about 14 or 1500 acres of land, etc. It's actually a good model which is replicated by so many spinning and textile mills later. It worked very well. Farmers, the contract farming is fairly well tested. The issue with contract farming is, one, trust between the entrepreneur and the groups of farmers. That is one. Second, there are always risks of default of performance. And therefore, I have often so many articles and speeches and all that I've talked about the need for a legal framework for enforceability of the contract. That's the biggest bane of the old contract farming system, which is just based on trust and some written piece of paper. I had even argued that a contract in a district between a sponsor and a group of farmers should actually be registered with the district collectorate. And in fact, I wrote about it soon after the FM in the month of May, when she announced a series of reforms that talked about enforceability of the contract and making it into tripartite, etc. Therefore, now you have a legal framework for contract farming, where how the farmers and the entrepreneur agree on a particular price. At what point of time they will agree on the price? Should it be before the harvest? Should it be before planting? Should it be soon after planting, during the growth phase of the crop, or just before harvest? Whatever. All those are nuances which can be addressed, and there are ways of addressing. There are techniques and strategies of fixing prices. But most important is the enforceability of the contract. This legal framework of contract farming ensures that the district administration becomes the mechanism for dispute resolution. But I don't know. I'm not very sure whether the district administration is actually legally equipped to to resolve a dispute between entrepreneurs and groups of farmers. But it cannot become a court or judicial process. Then it's going to take a long time because we need remedies. We need very, very quick remedies. So possibly, I would actually think we need a very separate mechanism, adjudication and dispute resolution mechanism for enforceability of the contract in contract farming. But this is a very positive step. Several industry leaders and entrepreneurs have spoken to me saying they are now beginning to look at contract farming. And my own advice to them is that work with FPO. Don't try and get together 100 disparate farmers. Whereas you work with one FPO which has 2, 3, 4, 500 members, farmers as members, and it will be much easier for them to deal with a corporate, which is a farmer producer company. And therefore, I think things are moving in the right direction. The sponsors or the entrepreneurs will probably wait and watch. It'll take some time, but the policy is very good, and I'm sure it is going to take off. Maybe sometime 2021. There'll be a lot more. We'll hear a lot more about contract farming. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Sir Balaram, before you begin, of course, your views on this, and I would also request you to add, how do you see the prospects of the food processing industry in India, which might be affected in a positive or a negative way because of contract farming?
So let me just tell you that contract farming, as he rightly said, is not new to India. So we have been doing contract farming, but there were 2-3 ingredients which are very important for contract farming. So 100% of seed industry works on contract farming.
That's right.
2 reasons. One is that when you grow seed, you pay more than the normal crop price, and the offtake is guaranteed. So whatever is produced is bought. Second is the explosive growth in poultry. 70,000 crores worth of chicken is grown in this country. For your information, about 75 million broilers a week. 80% is contract farming, where the price risk has been taken out from the farmers. The companies take the price risk. We will give all the inputs. Farmer will grow the bird and give it to us, and he will get a growing charges. And we will face the music of the volatility of the market. And the industry lost 25,000 crores in February or March, but farmers were paid a little late, but price risk was taken out. That is why it is successful. And that is why per capita consumption of chicken in 2000 was 1 kilo. Now it is 4.5 kilo. Explosive growth. And it will double again in next 10 years.
Absolutely.
So the main thing is that when there is a confirmed buyer, the farmers will organize themselves very well. Now, Contract Farming Act is not new. In 2003, we had a Model APMC Act. Contract Farming Act was part of that. But it was such a complex act, वो पता नहीं चलता था कि उसको मतलब implement कैसे करेंगे. Now there was dispute resolution mechanism with the district administration is a good thing, because the farmers will not go there.
I love this. I love this.
हमें क्या, you know, mentality is that they are ready to fight in the court for 10 years, but they are not ready to go to the commissioner. And in agriculture, all disputes are small disputes. One second thing is there is a provision for state registry for these contracts, and you can do it online registration also. So that will create a database. The third part, which is the most important part, is that land is not part of the contract.
Yes.
Even if the farmer defaults on 100 acres, you cannot recover from land.
Yes.
You can't attach his land. Yeah.
Yes.
So land is illegal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The point is that there are a lot of safeguards to be built.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
you asked me about food processing industry. So definitely food processing industry will definitely gain. But it will gain because of 2 reasons. One of the reasons is the Essential Commodities Act removal, so that they have visibility on their quality and cost. Entire wheat, 99% of Indian wheat comes in the month from 15th of April to 15th of May. But an atta company could not buy because of stock limits. Now they can buy. The next thing, they will go to Madhya Pradesh farmers and grow the that शरबती variety. वो कहेगा तुम मेरे लिए शरबती उगाओ सारे, मैं खरीदूंगा सारा का सारा. और वो कहेगा MSP plus 50% क्योंकि उसका प्रीमियम उधर ज्यादा है.
Right?
Yes.
So the issue is that for processors, premium we charge is more important. For us, no, because we can store it better than the government, we can transport it better than the government. Now, food processing is a different subject altogether. All these things will take long time to result in advantages for food processing. You think that food processing will start growing at 10% per annum? That is highly unlikely because Indians are still not evolved in food. I have been in chicken industry. We set up the first processing plant in year 2000 and only 5% of Indian chicken is processed. 95% or almost 65,000 crore worth of chicken is live. You go to the neighborhood shop, you have it cut in front of you and you bring it while it is bleeding at home and you don't mind that. So we will drive a Japanese car or a German car, we'll wear an Armani, but we'll eat pani puri on the street. So we are not evolved. So that evolution will take time and we have a short memory. Every time there is a pandemic, we feel कि अपना time आएगा, वो एक महीने में सब दुनिया भूल जाती है. So food processing industry, I think, will definitely benefit. But if you think that it will explode, the answer is no.
Interesting. Good. So I do have a few more questions, but I see there are lots of questions coming in from the from the people who have logged on. So before I get there, just one last question to the both of you all. Where do you really see the next big real, let's say, opportunity on this entire space? It can be in terms of investments, it can be in terms of business, it can be in terms of anything. What is the next so-called $1 billion opportunity on the agriculture fund? Or to both of you all?
Well, just before I answer that, my sense is 2020, the experience of 2020 pandemic, etc., has certainly created amongst people a certain heightened health consciousness. And I think this heightened health consciousness amongst people is certainly going to translate to something which is more positive for the food processing industry, particularly packaged branded, high value added health foods, because lives are going to be we are going to lead healthy lifestyles and we're going to eat more and more of health food. Therefore, there is going to be a healthification, if I can use that expression, healthification of our lifestyle and of the food that we eat. And that is most likely to create a certain opportunity. I'm talking about globally, okay? We are not just confined to India, but globally, this is what is seen as an emerging opportunity. Second, investment. If you're talking about investment, I think investment in the supply chain is what is going to drive the entire food processing sector, whether it is primary processing or secondary processing or tertiary processing. The entire the chain, I believe, is ripe for receiving a lot of investment, particularly private investment, notwithstanding the fact that the government has talked about 1 lakh crore investment in post-harvest agri-infrastructure, 25,000 crores a year over next 4 years, all that. I think the private sector should not rely on that at all. Whereas the private sector itself has, I believe, a huge opportunity in the entire supply chain from farm to fork, including warehouses, cold chain, and infusion of technology in the supply chain, increased digitalization, increased use of blockchain technology, for example, in the import and export trade, etc. I think that's going to be the way forward, and that is where I think investment opportunities arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Balam, over to you.
So I have actually my view is that first and foremost investments will come in near farm infrastructure. Now, the richer farmers and people who can, they will set up near farm infrastructure using this fund. So you will have small storages of 20, 30,000, 40,000 square feet, and you will have probably a small cold storage also, and probably this will happen. No big bang investment by any private company is going to come for next 3 years. The reason is there are 30,000 state laws and 3,000 central laws. Plenty of times laws are made and forgotten. Now, one of the big fanfare was food security bill. Where is it? Or land acquisition bill. Where is it? Huh? Okay. So with the change of the government, a lot of things change in this country. That's point number one. Point number two, what I see is plethora of startups in supply chain and aggregation. And it will be thousands. And 75-80% will fail because copying international models has never worked in India because our lay of land and our way of working is totally different.
So true. Yeah.
Even if you give free credit, the आड़तिया will be still difficult to eliminate.
Yes.
क्योंकि आप free देते हो लेकिन आप 9 से 5 देते हो, आड़तिया तो रात को भी देता है.
Correct.
मैं रात को 12 बजे भी जगाऊंगा, कहूंगा 5,000 रुपए दे दे तो दे देता है. So I'm saying that this is a different place. So you will see plethora of startups in this space who will do aggregation for who? For e-com, for modern retail, and for direct to home. So this will revolutionize. So I must tell you that one thing which Indians are going to probably not forget is this home delivery of food and the e-com, particularly of food, which we were not used to. So even if it comes down, and it has started coming down, so the kind of numbers a lot of these startups were showing in the first 3-4 months, because as a human being, we want to go out and buy, we want to touch, feel, we want to do that. And mall or say shopping is an experience for us also. That is our entertainment also to a certain extent. In smaller cities, that is a place to go to, isn't it?
Yes.
So my sense is that e-com companies will be there. From food processing sector, I'll tell you what will change for companies like ours. I think there will be an intermediate food production which will happen. That last mile can be completed in cloud kitchen or at home. So you do a half-done samosa or you do a half-done aloo tikki, and then you give it to Zomato or you give it to Swiggy. You got it?
Yes.
So those kind of business models will emerge, but there will be huge amount of activity first in cash crops, fruits, vegetables, and other crops which are high value crops. But nobody is touching cereals. Nobody is touching unless and until one is a processor or a user, and nobody is touching sugar.
Interesting. So there are lots of questions from from the audience. I'll just try and take a few of them. So this one is coming. Okay. So do we see a spread between farm to fork narrowing significantly in the next year? And what is the driver for this disintermediation which is going to happen? Who will be the loser, and will it happen nationwide, or will it be a lot more geography specific? Either of y'all can take it.
Well, may I, or Balram wants to say? Okay, I'm sure he will also respond. We have that far too many intermediaries who add to the cost but not to the value, that we all know. These agri market reforms are going to help disintermediation, and therefore it is logical to expect that the spread between the farm and the fork will, in terms of cost, will start narrowing. It is logical to expect. Well, how long it will take? Will it start happening next year? Is a very tough question. I think it'll take some time because the laws have been passed. It will take time for entrepreneurs and others to study, to start using these laws. But it is going to take time. But if you look at a 2, 3, 4 year or a 2 to 5 year time horizon, certainly supply chains are going to become more efficient. There will be the cost will decline. Whether that decline in cost will flow back to the farmer, we don't know. We don't know yet.
As a follow up to that question, one of our participants, Mr. Ashwini Bajaj, asks, India loses a huge amount of produce during its journey from farm to fork. Do you think whether the new changes in the policy help in reducing this wastage in the long term?
So,
Ram, over to you.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So I think that is the business model of aggregating companies actually.
Correct.
And there is nothing lost in this country. Let me just tell you, there is a loss of value. Jitna, all these global consultants, the kind of million tons they say there it is lost. तो अपने सड़कों पे ना 2-2 फुट का ब्रिंजल होता था इतना. If because million tons is a lot of vegetables. So there is a loss of value. Everything is consumed in this country, and whatever is not consumed by us is consumed by the animals. तो हर APMC में जाओगे तो बाहर उसके ना 100-200 गाय भैंसे भी होंगी. So there is nothing lost. There is a huge loss of value, and that is the business model of aggregator.
Yes.
And we have seen, I think, whatever little models we have studied, particularly in agriculture with FPO, and I think that within a year or two, the farmers evolved to the quality standards which the buyer wants. And the big example I want to give you is the potato example of Gujarat. Gujaratis eat so much of farsan, but they used to get their potatoes about 15 years ago from other states. One multinational came and they did contract farming of a particular type of potato because they needed certain amount of sugar, certain amount of starch, and certain amount of water. And the revolution is that 15 years ago, per hectare yield is now per acre yield in Gujarat. And the acceptance rate of potato, which used to be 50-55% by these companies, has gone to 90+%. Because this is what the acceptance rate in Europe also, if technology can solve the problem in Europe, it can solve. 90% of potato farmers who have contract farming with the farsan manufacturers or food processors use drip irrigation. Because potato is water.
Yes, right.
मतलब अगर आप इस पोटैटो पानी बेच रहे हैं आप 9 रुपए 10 रुपए किलो.
To that, are there examples of similar reforms globally? You mentioned something about drip irrigation. So, in terms of the reforms that we are currently seeing in the Indian agricultural space, have we seen examples of similar reforms globally, and what was the impact, and what lessons can we extrapolate from this global experience?
Countries have never implemented anything as permanent as India. And the problem with this country is that even if you write in a law that it is a temporary law for 1 year, it can continue for 70 years. क्योंकि उसको हटाने वाला कोई नहीं है, क्योंकि politically वो sensitive हो जाएगा. So most of the countries bring stability in food prices by way of 3 things. One is export taxes, import taxes, and forward markets. And I think India also tried to do that last October. They said in certain commodities on the exchange, the farmers could hedge so that these options can be settled at spot prices. They won't devolve into futures. And that was a very good effort. And I must say that this is what the American farmer or the developed world farmer does, that before sowing, he knows the price of the produce. And he can take a call. So that is the level of sophistication which can be reached. Now, there are 2 problems with this sophistication. Number 1, there is always a dissonance between the spot prices and the forward markets because of logistics and delivery issues. Number 2, 85% farmers are 1 hectare or 1.2 hectares.
Small. Unless
until they organize as FPOs, because these are the things which people can do when they have to get into exchanges. They have to consolidate their scale and power and understanding. So FPO is a must. And that is why I'm saying that more and more of us, when we go and buy, once there is a buyer, it is very easy for farmers to organize in FPOs because there is a offtake guarantee. Now, one of the toughest laws for farmers which changed the lives of the farmers was China. So when they realized that our land holding is 0.6, 0.7 hectares, then it is suboptimal. And one farmer is growing tomato, the other one is growing potato. Iske pest idhar. I'm saying that it is suboptimal. So then they started. Their public sector invested huge amounts of money in infrastructure, mainly irrigation, roads, and storage. But then they also mandated to farmers that all these villages, all farmers will grow tomato and this variety. So dande se unhone, now there are mushroom city, there is a tomato city, there is a complex which grow lettuce also. A few years ago, I had gone to a place called Kunming. Kunming is near Tibet. It is a plateau. And the best part was that thousands and thousands of hectares of mandated lettuce. And they provided lettuce to everybody, Burger King, McDonald's, etc., at very remunerative price. And there is a lettuce research station there. So how to develop better and better lettuce? Because there is scale. So the issue is that I'm saying that in most of the countries world over, agriculture will be supported. It has to be supported. Because food production is a very risky business. Farmer is paid twice. And you do not know what will be the price next year, whether the monsoon will be there next year or not, whether new virus will come, we don't know. There is so much of risk. So all countries in some way or the other will support agriculture. So that support will have to be given. But Indian government has to start demanding. And they should give support towards infrastructure rather than this things like fertilizer subsidy, dala aur khatam. Price subsidy, dala khatam. Food subsidy, khaya khatam. 5 lakh crore subsidies में दिया जाता है, 5,000 crore दिया जाता है irrigation पे, जो सबसे बड़ा determinant है productivity. And let me tell you the capacity of this country. If in all food products will come to global average, not the best, to global average, food production will double. क्या करोगे आप इतने food का? अभी तो मुझे डर लगता है अच्छे monsoon से, because another lack of support. मैं कहता हूँ alternate year drought होना चाहिए, so that अभी तो बहुत अच्छा हुआ कि 40-50 million tons of grain has left the godown so that there is space to keep more, and it has been distributed free. Otherwise, we would have problem of keeping 100 million tons of wheat and 117 million tons of paddy.
From Kapil Dev, Chandrasekhar sir, if you can take that. The MSP has...
Mudit, sorry about this. Just to add on to what Balram said, very interesting. The approach that China has taken is called a cluster approach. They'll identify clusters where a single crop will be grown so that they'll have economies of scale. The government of India now is looking at there are 640 or so districts in our country. They're now identifying district-wise crops. Which crop can grow well in which district? They're creating a map, and we will probably be moving towards that kind of a cluster approach based on districts in various states. Anyway, okay, please go ahead. Sorry.
So this comes from Kapil Dev.
The question.
Yes, the question is, the MSP has become a key discussion point in doubling the farmer's income. Government is now expanding its MSP operation in various commodities. Is it contradictory to the free market push by the government? And what's your view on this as it is impacting the market equilibrium? Very interesting question.
Well, yeah, I know. It's actually a slightly politically sensitive question. Number one, I've written commentaries on this. My strong sense is MSP is actually outliving its utility. The way MSP is determined does not take into account the market conditions at all, neither global market nor domestic market. Although they claim that yes, they take all these factors into account, but the MSP does not reflect market conditions, and therefore we need to look at something beyond MSP. MSP plus plus is what I would call. MSP is a politically inevitable MSP. You can't wish away MSP or hoga because it's politically so sensitive, and therefore, but the way the MSP is raised year after year, and in some way, pardon my saying, indiscriminately, it doesn't augur well for Indian agriculture. As I said, what we should be focusing on, when I said first, the structural issues of farmers, of strengthening the input delivery system, expanding irrigation, infusing technology, invest in rural infrastructure. I think that's actually the way forward. Once that is done, the role of MSP will start declining, and our MSP hikes will have to be moderated, more in keeping with global and domestic market conditions. And second, we also need to look at, we can't look at MSP in isolation. We need to look at MSP with other policies, like our procurement policy, like our import and export policy. And why am I saying this? Take pulses, for example. Until 2007, pulses export was allowed. In 2007, we had drought-like conditions, prices went up, pulses export was banned. It remained banned for 11 years. And in 2017, we had a big increase in pulses production. Prices fell below MSP, and yet export still remained banned. It was after fellows like me writing about it, speaking on television, actually calling the minister and the bureaucrats, then exports were opened up. Therefore, this export should have been opened up long ago. For I think there is a mismatch amongst various policies of the government of India, because each ministry is working in a silo. Agriculture ministry, food ministry, finance ministry, commerce, they need to get together. I think that doesn't happen. MSP is an issue, yes, I agree, but the possible negative impact of MSP can be moderated through very nuanced policy making. Yeah.
So on MSP, I want to tell you something that actually it is a issue and a non-issue. Now there are 23 commodities Government of India declares MSP for, and let me leave sugar out because sugar is a political discussion in itself.
Absolutely.
90% of MSP is used for wheat and paddy. In Bihar, corn, last 5 years, we have procured 100,000 ton plus corn every year. Only once we have paid above MSP, otherwise the price is below MSP, nobody bothers. So MSP has only benefited the big farmers of Haryana and Punjab. Only 6% farmers have benefited from MSP. So that is the story of MSP. And that is one thing which has to be broken in future. And the Punjab and Haryana farmers are also agitating only because of MSP. Because there is a very big racket behind MSP. And let me tell you for 1 minute what is the racket. So in Punjab and Haryana, the procurement is close to about 1.7 to 1.8 lakhs. Crores. 3% is government fee. 3% is APMC fee. 2.5% is Aditya fee. Wow. 8.5% the farmer should pay for the procurement. Yes. 8.5% of say 2 lakh crores is 15,000 crores. All this is reimbursed by central government. Central government does not reimburse for procurement in UP through FCI. It does not reimburse anything in Rajasthan. But all these farmers, because of their political power, have wrangled this. It is free money of 4,000-5,000 crores for these government, 4,000-5,000 crores for APMC, which are political parties, and about 3,000-4,000 crores of for Adatyas. Not only that, all this 1.7, 1.8 lakh crores to Adatya is routed through Adatyas. तो आड़तिया के लिए कितना मजा है, उसको उसका कमीशन मिलता है, फिर जो फार्मर को वो जो इनपुट बेचता है उसका मार्जिन, उसका पेमेंट अश्योर्ड है क्योंकि पैसा उसके थ्रू जाता है, और जो उसका जो क्रेडिट लेता है वो क्रेडिट एश्योरेंस इज देयर. You all work with banks, they don't have credit assurance at 12-13% interest rate also. This chap has credit assurance at 24% rate of interest, risk free.
Yep.
So point is, this is the racket, that is why they're agitating. But guys, days of MSP are numbered. I think earlier efforts by UPA government sanctioned more than 500 crore 2-3 times for crop diversification in Haryana and Punjab. Incentive into the system, who will change? Or cost of production of wheat and paddy in Haryana and Punjab is very low. Bijli free, pani free, और जितना चाहिए उतना. आप एग्रीकल्चर में, आई कैनॉट इमेजिन कि तुम बिहार से लेबर लाके एग्रीकल्चर में इतना प्रॉफिट कमा सकते हो, क्योंकि बाकी सब कुछ फ्री है. मतलब लोग कहते हैं कि they do it themselves and they don't make money. Now these people are getting labor to do agriculture and make super profits.
So just to add on, with the recent state laws and the state announcement that Punjab has done, where they've announced that the any person procuring stocks below the MSP will.
अभी मैं जवाब दे देता हूँ before you answer. ये free market है बॉस. जरूरी है कि तूने जाके इस मॉल से ही माल खरीदना है, किसी और मॉल से खरीद ले.
Fair enough.
Just ignore that state ना. Who will suffer? पंजाब में पंजाब farmers will suffer, क्योंकि है क्या कि माल नहीं बिकेगा तो ट्रेडर पता है क्या कहेगा, मैं इलीगल काम कर रहा हूं, मैं 12 रुपए में नहीं मैं 11 रुपए में लूंगा, क्योंकि रिस्क है. तो एवरीथिंग, ऑल द हिट विल गो टू द फार्मर. ये जो है इनको 1 साल बाद समझ में आएगा, जब इनका माल सारा जो है राजस्थान और हरियाणा में और यूपी में जाके बिकेगा.
जब गेहूं हार्वेस्ट आएगा अप्रैल मई महीने में 2021 पता लग जाएगा. I think it's a bad law, very poorly enacted. It's going to hurt Punjab farmers.
Absolutely.
Balram, last question for you.
Yeah.
So this is from Ashish Agarwal. Hi Balram, do you think will Adatyas react as their livelihood will come down with this entire disintermediation? Also, how will it affect farmers' support system? As you said, effectively a farmer can get access to capital at 12 o'clock in the night through the Adatya via a loan.
So the technology is not changing. So perhaps my generation will know, and our engineering colleges know, we used to use slide rule. Calculator came later. But slide rule manufacturers did not become calculator manufacturers because technology was different. But Adatyas are very useful people in our agri value chain. Competition will make them efficient, will make them charge less, and they will morph into aggregators and supply chain providers because they are the people who understand. They have preferred relationships with the farmers. अगर एज ए कंपनी मैं बिहार जाता हूं, आड़तिया जो हैं वो एग्रीगेटर बन गए. वो पहले 5% पे काम करते थे 2 करोड़ का, अभी 2% पे काम करते हैं 50 करोड़ का.
Oh my God.
तो स्केल जो है बड़े प्रोक्योरमेंट से आता है. पंजाब और हरियाणा के आड़तिया की बात नहीं कर रहा, जिसकी तो पार्टी चल रही थी उसकी तो पार्टी खत्म होगी.
Correct.
But all these आड़तियास will morph into aggregators and service providers for different companies because they have preferred relationship. और आड़तियास का क्या होता है, उनका रिलेशनशिप 1 साल का नहीं है, उनका जनरेशन का है.
Correct.
मेरा दादा और उसका दादा साथ काम करते थे.
Absolutely.
बिल्कुल.
So the kind of flexibility which Adatya can give, though they will remain an important part of the chain. The only thing is that they will adopt technology, they will become more efficient. They will look at margins from scale rather than absolute margins from, or say margins from business. So my sense is that nobody in chain is going away. As Mr. Chandrasekhar said, APMCs will be there because they have infrastructure, they will become efficient. Free market forces have to prevail. As soon as there is a choice, everything changes. We have seen in so many sectors. BSNL, MTNL का क्या हुआ? Who is the beneficiary? और हमारा क्या है, एक चीज लाइफ में देखना कि जैसे ही वैल्यू एड होता है ना तो टैक्स आ जाता है, टैक्स सरकार के पास.
Very interesting. So on that note, we would like to thank you for your participation and for your time, both of y'all. It was an absolutely wonderful conversation, and thank you for all the insights. I'm sure everybody has a lot to think about post this. Once again, thank you for your thoughts and your inputs.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
God bless you all. God bless you all.
Thank you. Be safe, yeah.
Thank you.
Be safe. Yeah.